If you're packing your bag for a day in the mountains, probably one of the biggest considerations you'll have will be, is my pack too heavy? So are you going out for all day? You don't want your pack to be mega heavy, but you're just in pain, discomfort, halfway during the day or as you're heading down from the mountain. So even more so if you're going into the mountains like me for photography. So at the moment I've been taking my Canon EOS R6 Mark II, just because it's slightly lighter than my R5, and then normally take two lenses. So I have three main landscape lenses. The initial one I'll take is the 14 to 35 f4, because you probably want that wide angle focal length, to look for foreground rocks or things like that in the foreground where you've got the mountain in the background. Then you've got your longer lens. So I have to decide between the 24 to 105 f4 and the 70 to 200 f4. I can't take all three, it's going to be way too heavy for me. So normally I take the 24 to 105. There's always that thing in the back of my mind, well, I want that 100 to 200 millimeter reach, just to photograph, say, layers of mountains going into the distance. So with that, in terms of the weight, I reached out to OM System recently. I said, hey, would it be possible to borrow one of your cameras and two of your lenses? So in this video, I'm going to talk about that camera and the two lenses and see how it fares against my current gear. When I reached out to OM System, I asked if I could borrow their OM-5 Mark II, which, as you can see, is very small and compact. In terms of the lenses, I'm borrowing their 8 to 25 f4 Pro and the 12 to 100 f4 Pro. Now, the reason why this is much smaller and more compact is because it has a micro four thirds sensor. So with the lenses, that means that I have focal length equivalent of about 16 through to 200 millimeter in two lenses, which in my full frame camera would be three lenses. So I'm going to get set up behind me here and do some initial testing of this camera and talk about some of its features. Okay, I've got the camera and the tripod, composition set up, but let's talk about the OM-5 Mark II a little bit more. So it has a 20 megapixel sensor. R6 Mark II has a 24 megapixel sensor, so not a massive amount of difference there. You should be able to get a reasonable sized printout of this. But what it does have is something called computational photography features. And one of those features is high res mode. Actually, it has two, handheld and tripod. Tripod mode gives you an 80 megapixel RAW file. The handheld mode gives you a 50 megapixel RAW file. What it does, it takes multiple shots and merges them together. I think for the tripod mode it takes 8, and for the handheld mode it takes 12. To access it, we've got a CP button at the top here. We press that down and we turn the thumb wheel at the back there. And you'll see there computational mode's off, high res shot tripod, handheld shot. So you can actually use both on the tripod. We want the most resolution for this, so we'll use the tripod mode. Then I will put a 2-second delay on, because I don't want any vibrations going through the camera as it starts taking the shot. Now you'll see there on this screen here, I'm using an aperture of f5.6. That's because diffraction comes in a lot sooner with a micro four thirds sensor. I probably don't want to go much below f8 because that's roughly equivalent to f16 on a full frame camera. So all I'm going to do now is change my exposure. I'm way overexposed at the moment. You can see the sky is very bright. Now I may have to bracket this shot, which I don't know if it's going to cause any problems with the high res mode, but we will find out. Yeah, oh yes, a very high, there we go. Yeah, I mean, it's very much underexposed. So I'll take my first shot. So a 2-second delay, and then what you'll see, it'll say busy, so now it's taken the shot. And I think what it's doing now is merging them together. Going reasonably quick, so then I'll adjust my exposure to bring up the shadows to about there, and I will take another shot. And there we go. Now, one thing to note with the high res modes, if you have things moving in the scene, it may have trouble. It may not even take the shot, or it may create some weird artifacts in the raw file. You'll notice maybe some artifacts appearing. I did take a sample shot down at a river. There was a fast flowing river and it actually couldn't do it. And actually the message came up on the screen saying basically it couldn't do it. But what it does do, it does give you a raw file for the very first shot. So you'll have something as a backup, and that's a 20 megapixel file. So it gives you something at least. So yeah, I've got my first shot in the bag. So we'll see how that comes out. One of the other computational photography features the OM-5 Mark II has is live ND, where you can do long exposure shots in camera, anything between 1 and 4 stops. Now I'm just going to have to give the lens a wipe because it is raining. And actually, talking of the rain, one of the features that the OM system cameras have is an IP rating of 53, which is very good weather sealing. It's not waterproof, but it's a lot better than my Canon cameras. And they've given me permission to shoot in the rain, so that's a good job because it is raining. So at the moment, without the live ND engaged, I'm shooting at 1/5 of a second. So I'll just give the lens a wipe again, take a shot. And that's perfectly pleasing. But say I want to do a long exposure, I hit the CP button, and you'll see here we've got ND2, 4, 8 and 16. So let's go for 4. And that gives us an exposure time of 0.3 of a second. Now you can actually see on the screen the effect that you will get before you even press the shutter. So you can decide to change it should you wish. But we'll go for that. And that looks pretty good. I have a composition set here where I'm going to test the sharpness of the 8-25mm lens. So as you can see here, I'm currently shooting at f4. So I'm going to take that shot and I'm going to focus on the background because that's where I'd normally focus for this scene because my subject are the hills in the background. That's where I'd focus here. Now with my full frame camera, I'd normally be shooting this about between f8 and f11 and I'd get these foreground rocks to be acceptably sharp. They're a metre or so away from me. So I'm going to stop down to f5.6, take another shot. Now I'm actually shooting this in the 20 megapixel mode at the moment, f8. Now I think using f11 may give me some diffraction, but it's worth checking. So there we go, 4 shots from f4 to f11 in the low res mode. So I'm going to go back up to f4. And I'm going to put the high res mode on. So high res tripod. So I'm going to have to stick the 2-second timer on for that. So it has its own 2-second timer. So, yep. So take that shot. Now it is a bit windy, so the wind is actually, I could see it was maybe blowing the camera a little bit there, so that may cause issues. f8. Oh, sorry, f5.6. Now I'm showing a little bit of clipping here, but that doesn't really matter. It's just as a bright part of the sky in the top right hand of the frame, but that doesn't really matter for this test. f8. And finally, f11. So that's now just merging them together. So that's all 4 shots with low res and the 80 megapixel high res. Now what I'll do is, off camera, I will do the 50 megapixel, so the handheld mode, but on the tripod. See if there's a difference between the 50 megapixel and the 80 megapixel when it's on the tripod. So I've been out shooting with the OM-5 Mark II for a few times now, and I've got some raw files to show in Lightroom, but I thought I'd give you a size comparison to begin with. Now this is my R5, my R6 II is recording me, but they're a similar size, so I'll give you a rough idea there. And as you can see, there is a considerable size difference, but for me, the main consideration is the weight saving. So my R6 Mark II with 14-35 and 24-105 lenses, they come to 1,910 grams. Whereas the OM-5 with the 8-25 and 12-100 lenses, they come to 1,390 grams, which is a weight saving of 515 grams. Now, OM system also do a kit lens, which is a 14-150 grams, which seems to be a pretty good lens. If I replace the 12-100 with that, they come to 1,114 grams, a saving of 791 grams, and that's pretty good. Now, this is not a sponsored video, but I want to tell you about some cashback offers which OM System have on until the 6th of January, where you can get a saving of up to £600 in cash back. They do different levels, 100, 2, 3, 5 and 600. And if you buy a product and register it, you also get their extended 5-year warranty. I'll leave more details in the description below. Now let's dive into Lightroom and have a look at some of those raw files. So this is one of the first photographs I captured up at the Needle. This is the high-res version I exposure bracketed this with 2 shots, and this is the shot where I exposed for the shadows. Now, I'm saying there, it looks pretty sharp. Now, in hindsight, this is actually shot at f5.6. I probably should have shot at f8, because if we go down to the corner, I think this is just the reason why this looks as soft as it does. It's just because it wasn't shot at a small enough aperture to get this, because this is quite close to the camera. And if you remember, I actually focused on the needle here, so it's some considerable distance away. But if I zoom back into the needle again, to me it doesn't look maybe as sharp as I was hoping it would look. Now, I actually reached out to OM System UK Ambassador Benjamin Barendek. You should check him out on Instagram. I'll put his information somewhere on the screen here. He's a really good photographer, goes into the mountains a lot. So I reached out to him, and he suggested that you would need to add some extra sharpening in Lightroom just to bring out the best of these files. Again, because they're not true high-resolution files, like I would get out of my Canon R5 at 45 megapixels. This is the pixel shift technique where the sensor's moving around and then it combines the photographs together. So like I say, it's not a true high-resolution file. But ultimately, I was initially impressed. And this is just the combination of the 2 photographs together to create an HDR image. And if we then go to this spot here where I took various shots between f4 and f11, now this is the low res file, and if I zoom in at f4 into the corner, it looks pretty sharp. But if we go down to f5.6, we can see it's getting sharper. And f8, even sharper still, and that's very sharp, f8. Now I actually focused on one of these hills in the background because they're my subject. I mean, they'll be sharp. Yeah, the corner is sharp. Now, if I actually go to f11 and go to the corner, we actually see it's still very sharp. Now, I would have thought diffraction would have come in at this point, but it hasn't. So that's actually really good to know that f11 might depend on the focal length. I mean, this is shot at 12 millimeter, so it might depend on the focal length. So maybe more experimental. That's what I normally do. I experiment with my lenses when I get them to figure out when diffraction will come in. So next, we'll look at the high-res version, and this is the f8 version. Looks pretty sharp to me. Again, this could just be because I need to do that extra sharpening in Lightroom, which I haven't done here. I just wanted to leave it, kind of out of camera. We go to the background. We can see it looks pretty sharp, but since I've actually done these and talked to Benjamin, I've done a couple of extra things. I've actually done a longer delay. I think anywhere between 4 and 8 seconds, because you can do that on the OM-5. You can actually increase the wait, what they call the waiting time before it actually takes the shot. So it's worth experimenting with that in the high-res mode. But yeah, I mean, that looks pretty good. And then I decided to test the 8-25mm lens at f8. Now, these are low-res versions, and this is at f4. Very sharp in the center of the frame at the bottom. Let's go to where I can get some more detailed grass. He's not ultra sharp at f4 in the corner, but kind of acceptably sharp. But if we go down to f8, we can see it's a lot sharper, and that's very sharp in the corner. So that's really good news. I actually focused on this hill here in the background because that's my subject. Hopefully the light would be coming from the right-hand side and hitting this area of the landscape at this time of year. Didn't get it that morning. Again, if we look at the f11 version, and yeah, looks pretty sharp again. So I'm really surprised at f11. Now, if we look at the live ND version, just zoom back out of there. This is the shot before any live ND went on, and that's at 1/5 of a second. You see that nice water flow there. Then I did an ND4 version, which is this one here. And that looks pretty good to me. I can't see any issues with that, because it's taking multiple shots again, and it's aligning them and merging them and whatever. That looks pretty good to me. Now, would I actually use the live ND? I don't think so, because for something like this, I'd probably be using a polarizer, my case polarizer, which is magnetic, so I can put NDs on top. So I'll probably just use them. But it's worth knowing that if,
For whatever reason, I didn't have my filters with me. I've got the Live ND as a backup. It only does up to 4 stops, which is potentially a downside, but it's still a nice to have. Now, once I got a bit more knowledge about the camera with the high res mode, I got this shot here. Now, this is the low res version. But we can see it looks really good. This is a single shot, not exposure bracketed or anything. This is a single shot. This is me. I've actually processed it of how I would, and you can see there's no noise in the shadows here, and I've lifted the shadows by 67% and the exposure by almost 1 full stop. Now we'll look at the high-res version. I'll just zoom in. We can see that looks pretty sharp. That's probably the sharpest that I've actually seen the high-res mode. And I believe I had a waiting time, what they call a waiting time of 4 seconds. So I've given the camera enough time to settle down. Let's say you can set 8 seconds, maybe even 10, and even up to 20 seconds, might be a bit more than that. Just let the camera settle down a bit after you've pressed the shutter button. Now, obviously, a remote release would help with this even more. But again, the tonality there, the colours, very good. Now, I actually shot this side by side with my R6. I use a very similar tripod, and this is the actual R6 shot here. And, for 24 megapixels, and this is the 80 megapixel shot here, very similar in terms of the colors and what have you. And if we look at the low-res version, it's probably a better comparison. This is the low-res version on the OM-5 and then the R6 version. Not a lot of difference in it. So I'm really happy with this, with the OM-5 here. I will hopefully get up into the mountains with it before I have to send it back, and hopefully do another video on it then, kind of more of a real-world experience, carrying it with all the other gear that I carry. So before I show you some more photographs I captured with the OM-5, hopefully you liked the video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. As always, any comments appreciated. And if you don't already subscribe to the channel, please do consider subscribing. Until the next video, bye bye.